Happening this hour, President Donald Trump is speaking from Clive, Iowa. It is a suburb just west of Des Moines with a population of 20,000. The president's speech is a de facto kickoff of the midterm election season. Trump will be addressing the cost of living in America. One street in Clive has been shut down and designated as a space for protesters. We're going to go live to the president as soon as he begins speaking. President Trump's visit to Iowa comes as Trump reshuffles his team in Minnesota. Overnight, there were more protests after Saturday's death of 37-year-old ICU nurse and anti-ICE protester Alex Preddy. Last night, demonstrators targeted the hotel believed to be used by Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino. Today, Bovino is expected to leave Minneapolis. And with Bovino out, President Trump sent in Tom Homan, border czar Tom Homan. He will now be overseeing enforcement operations in Minnesota. First up, on Homan's agenda, today a meeting with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. Correspondent Jon Glasgow joins me from Minneapolis. John?
Yeah, Greta, great to be with you here. We know that conversation happened here with border czar Tom Homan, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, also Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and also the Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hare. Now, it's unclear whether or not they came to an agreement on anything, but they do all share the same consensus that they would like to ease the tension here in Minneapolis. So here's what we know about what both sides want out of this whole equation in order to bring some more safety back to the community. Governor Walz, he wants less agents in Minnesota. Impartial investigations into the fatal shootings of both Renee Good and Alex Preddy, and to end what he deems the campaign of retribution against Minnesota. Now, on the flip side of the coin, though, the Trump administration wants access to the prisons and jails. DHS says that 1,360 criminal illegals are being held behind bars. And Homan says that would help reduce the ICE agents on the street. Yet the governor has said in the past, by law, they can't legally keep them in the jails if ICE doesn't pick them up before their release date. So maybe they can come to a consensus on that. Along with overseeing the ICE agents, though, the other part of this whole equation is Homan's responsibility, leading Trump's investigation into the Minnesota fraud. Remember, the president is accusing the governor and the mayor of knowing about this fraud and turning a blind eye to it for political reasons. So with Homan now on the ground here in the Twin Cities, the Democrats are calling for DHS Secretary Kristi Noem to resign. President Trump, he was asked about this today, and this is what he had to say. Watch.
I think he's doing a very good job. The border is totally secure. You know, you forget, we had a border that I inherited where millions of people were coming through. Now we have a border where no one is coming through.
So the Trump administration is also defending Chief of Border Patrol Greg Bovino, who's been on the streets here in Minneapolis for weeks. He's now moving to another assignment in a different state. Last night, agitators, they stormed another hotel. This is the third time they believe Bovino was staying at this one. Now, one thing that we did see, Greta, that we haven't seen before is multiple law enforcement agencies arriving on scene in riot gear to make arrests. This hasn't happened in the past, so maybe this is part of those conversations between the elected officials here. This comes as Democrats say that the video of Preddy being shot on Saturday contradicts DHS's narrative that those border agents are also wearing body cam footage, so that will be part of this federal investigation. President Trump was asked whether or not this will be fair and impartial today. Here's what he said. Watch.
You know, we're doing a big investigation. I want to see the investigation. I'm going to be watching over it. I want a very honorable and honest investigation. I have to see it myself.
Meantime, you got FBI Director Kash Patel saying that he's now launching an investigation into an alleged coordinated signal group chat that was used by anti-ICE activists in Minneapolis. The chat allegedly is being used to track, identify, and impede federal agents. Now, free speech advocates, they are already raising concerns over First Amendment rights. And Greta, there are reports today that Alex Preddy was also known to the feds ahead of his death. He apparently got in an altercation with some of these agents about a week ago and broke a rib, so he was on their radar. We'll wait to see if there are more details that come out about that. I'll send it back to you.
John, before you go, why aren't they all wearing body cams? I mean, that's a discussion we've had in this country. Is it a finance thing or a decision not to? Do you have any idea? Because that certainly would help, because in order to have a full and fair investigation, it sure helps to have as much video as we can.
That's a great question, and whether or not some of them are wearing them and some of them aren't, that might be something that the local officials bring up, that they want all of them to be wearing body cams and identifying themselves. What I did notice, though, in a lot of the videos that I'm seeing online of people that are capturing these encounters with these, when ICE agents are trying to make an arrest and there's bystanders trying to videotape it, the ICE agents themselves are also videotaping the bystanders. So maybe they're using that to protect themselves in future investigations.
Jon Glasgow in the very warm city of Minneapolis. Enjoy the temperature. Thank you, John. Now back to the topic of Iowa. We are awaiting a speech from President Trump. He is expected to discuss the economy. Today is his midterm campaign kickoff. President Trump is going to start traveling weekly ahead of the midterms since the margins currently between Republicans and Democrats are a hair. Iowa, of course, is his first stop. Former Republican Senator from the great state of Pennsylvania, Rick Santorum, joins me. Nice to see you, sir. Any thoughts why Iowa? He's got a lot of states to choose from if he's going to kick off this campaign, midterm campaign.
Well, the only thing I can think of is, it was the starting point for the presidential bid, and maybe he sees this as sort of a kickoff of that cycle too. Who knows? Iowa's not necessarily anymore a particularly contested state. It's becoming more and more red. There are a bunch of open congressional seats there, though. So and a Senate and an open Senate race. So it's a very important state. Again, all those races should go Republican, but I suspect in this election cycle they could all use a boost.
Going back to right before the election, about 3 days before the election in 2024, the Des Moines Register released a poll, and it's sort of been the gold standard pollster. And in that poll, Kamala Harris, the vice president, was supposed to beat Trump by 3 or 4 points. And it was like 3 days before the election. And then Trump ended up winning by 13 or 14 points.
Right.
It shook up everything when we're trying to make sure we have, integrity in the system, and, pollsters are getting it wrong. I mean, it's pretty nutty what's going on.
Yeah, that was a very strange thing, because Ann Seltzer, who is the Des Moines Register pollster, is the pollster when it comes to the Iowa caucus. And she's got it right every single time, a Democrat and Republican.
38 years.
Yeah.
38 years she was their pollster, yeah.
Not anymore, not after that, and so it was really off by a lot, and it was used by the Harris campaign and the media to try to promote that Harris was still in this thing and it was still winnable, and that all the other polls were wrong because she was such a reliable voice. So sad end of a career on her part, but who again don't know the story behind why that happened. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, it seems to me President Trump today has to convince the Iowa farmers that these tariffs are a good idea, because these tariffs have hit the farmers. So I guess that's why I'm surprised that he went there, even though he had that resounding victory back in November of 2024. The farmers are hurting out in that state.
The farmers are hurting in a lot of places. I mean, tariffs have been damaging, and all these promises of being able to sell goods into China that Trump promised, and a lot of other promises just really haven't come through. The ethanol has been a big issue in Iowa, and that industry is hurting too. So there is all the more reason, frankly, to go to Iowa and make the case that things are going better than maybe the perception is out there. As I mentioned, open Senate race, 3 open House races out of 4. I mean, there's a lot to be contested in Iowa this year.
Well, the economy is one of those things, so it's sort of hard to tell somebody the economy is going well or going poorly, because you feel the economy yourself. And, so that's sort of a hard sell, unless you want to try to convince someone that it's going to get a whole lot better because I'm going to do A, B, and C. But, I mean, even look farther beyond Iowa. Nike is going to lay off 775 people because of automation. And Washington Post looks like it's going to have huge layoffs. I mean, there are a lot of sort of indicators that, some of these big corporations are starting to do layoffs, and it's a little bit alarming.
Yeah, I think what Trump's going to try to do, and I did a little bit of this when I thought was his kickoff end of last year when he went to Pennsylvania, but he sort of didn't follow up on that very quickly. So maybe they're restarting here in Iowa, is to really talk about the benefits of the One Big Beautiful Bill, talk about the the tax returns, that when people file their taxes because of the no tax on tips and some other things, there's a chance that people are going to get some pretty good refunds. At least that's what everybody's talking about. So I think he's got the idea is, hey, look, things may be a little shaky. Here's what's going on, but here are the things that you're going to be receiving and getting as a result of some of the changes that were made in the bills last year. So he's got a story to tell, and he needs to start telling it. I understand, and it's perfectly normal for second-term presidents to spend a lot more time on national security issues, and President Trump certainly is. But that tends to be not a winner at election time. Pocketbook issues are, and so he's out here doing what he needs to do.
Well, I think it'd be interesting to watch just sort of the performance of it, because when he when he had that very long 2-hour, when he went to the press briefing room and he had just a bunch of journalists sort of sitting there staring at him, it was rather, long and drawn out, and he had no energy. He really feeds off crowds, and so I'm sort of interested with, a rally. I mean, he really gets going, but I think if you compare that, his demeanor when he talked to the press in the press briefing room, which was endless, or here, where if he's all jazzed up, you'll see how much he feeds off an audience.
He does, and it's interesting. Having been to a few Trump rallies myself, he does feed off that energy. But what I have noticed at some of these rallies is the longer he goes, the energy dissipates. It's not like it's nothing. It's certainly better than the White House press conference, but when he was effective at the end of his campaign, his rallies actually got shorter, and they were punchier, and they kept the audience engaged. No matter how big of a Trump fan you are, if you're going 2 hours, you're just not gonna. It's just not going to go well. So hopefully, the message discipline for the president is going to be strong here, and that he keeps it, an hour, maybe an hour and 15 at most. But the longer it goes, you'll notice. You just feel it in the room. The energy starts to leave.
All right, well, we're standing by to see what his energy level is, how long he goes. We'll watch the clock. But this is the first big rally he's having in this midterm election season. Senator Rick Santorum from the great state of Pennsylvania. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Coming up, a West Virginia librarian arrested for threatening President Trump. Plus, 81 years ago today, the Soviet army liberated Auschwitz, the Nazi death camp, and rescued 7,000 prisoners. I'm going to show you a video you will never forget. That when the record continues.
Donald Trump's second presidency is changing America. Now you need to watch Rob Schmidt tonight on President Trump's next big move. Then tune into Rob Finnerty taking on Trump's critics. President Trump says he watches Newsmax. You should too. Download our Newsmax app to watch us anytime, anywhere. Millions are making the switch to Newsmax. Be one.
Don't kibble your dog.
Hey, Dr. Marty.
Hey, back.
What's wrong with this?
Let's check it out. It's still kibble, which means they're ultra-processed. At Dr. Marty, we freeze-dried premium meats, fruits, and vegetables, and they're gonna love it.
Precise designs, subtle curves, curated upgrades, elevated design for thoughtful living. Thuma.
If you can go anywhere in the world, where would you go?
Actually, I'm going to Thailand in a couple months.
But do you have your passport and pre-check ready?
I've been putting that off. I heard it's such a pain.
You clearly haven't heard of GovPlus.com.
Plus, what's that?
They have completely automated the process of applying for your passport, pre-check, birth certificate, and much more. Here, let me show you how it works. So when you go to GovPlus.com, you fill out their secure online form, which only takes minutes. That then applies your information to all your other documents on GovPlus. You can track your documents here, too. Applications are all online.
Thank you for my passport and pre-check for my trip.
Safe travels.
Total Beets, America's best-selling Beets brand, is available at Walmart. Total Beets blood pressure support soft chews contain a key ingredient clinically shown to deliver 2 times better blood pressure support. Take control of your health. Head to Walmart and get Total Beets blood pressure support soft chews today.
This isn't your average pill. This is Rose Sparks. Rose Sparks. Rose Sparks. Rose Sparks.
Rose Sparks is a fast-acting solution because it dissolves under your tongue.
Rose Sparks.
Guys, get started today.
Connect with a provider to find out if Rose Sparks are right for you.
We have breaking breaking news, because at any moment we are expecting President Donald Trump to deliver remarks on the economy and energy in Clive, Iowa. We're going to take you to that event live as soon as the president takes the stage. And this event in Iowa is part of the White House midterm push towards affordability. The White House announced that each week ahead of the midterms, the president will be visiting a different city. White House correspondent Mike Carter is in Clive, Iowa. He's visiting those cities too, apparently. Mike?
Hey, Greta, good to be with you. This is part of the economic push of the Trump administration. We saw President Trump a few weeks ago in Pennsylvania, also in North Carolina, and today here in Iowa. The president will be pulling back from his foreign travels over the next several months, focusing more on domestic travels. Each week over the next several months, we're expecting President Trump to come to cities like this one, Clive, Iowa, just outside of Des Moines, and talk about what the administration is doing to lower prices, particularly energy prices. They are down across the board in much of the country. Gas prices, average price for a gallon of gas, $2.57. That's helping a lot of people here in Iowa. But of course, a lot of talk still about Minnesota. And today we heard from Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman making a plea for the president to make a direct appeal to immediately fire Secretary Kristi Noem. Fetterman saying Americans have died. She is betraying DHS's core mission and trashing your border security legacy. Do not make the mistake President Biden made for not firing a grossly incompetent DHS secretary. That, of course, Alejandro Mayorkas, who Fetterman is mentioning. We did hear from the president moments ago before he is slated to make his speech this afternoon, talking about what is happening in Minnesota. Of course, border czar Tom Homan now in Minnesota, Greg Bovino and other federal officials slated to leave Minnesota today. President Trump still seeming confident, not only in his Secretary of Homeland Security, but in the entire staff headed to Minnesota. Take a listen.
Look, we have an incredible team. We did something that nobody said was possible. We didn't go back to Congress and ask for legislation. We closed the border. And in the last 8 months, they have, and this is actually hard to believe, nobody crossed the border.
And I'm here with Keith Whelan. He drove down here to the Trump rally from northeast Iowa. Keith, the president's going to make a heavy push today about energy prices. We did talk about how gas is down here in Iowa. You used to work in the oil business. How is this helping folks in your life and you personally?
Yeah, so we have a very rural community. My name is Keith Whelan. I'm a county supervisor for Buchanan County. In the oil field, I worked on actually 4 different continents. So seeing my friends and my family and all those things, the farmers in our area, fuel costs is a huge deal for us. When I worked in the oil field, obviously that was the big stinking deal. President Biden wouldn't follow law, wouldn't allow those drilling rights, those leases to exist on federal lands. He wouldn't allow the drilling to happen. So President Trump, here we go. Turn the spigot back on and drill, baby, drill.
All right, it's helping you. It's helping a lot of folks here in Iowa. Thank you very much, Keith. Greta, as Rick Santorum just mentioned, look, you have a lot of midterm elections that will be affected here in Iowa. Several open house seats. Joni Ernst not seeking re-election. Neither is Iowa's governor, Kim Reynolds. So this is a huge play for President Trump today to also push Republicans over the board, get them across the finish line, rather. And the president is hoping that his popularity still matters here in Iowa. This is a smaller event venue here today in Clive City than we're used to seeing from President Trump. Maybe several hundred protesters, not the typical huge arena-style rallies for the president. But again, a heavy push on the economy today and lower energy prices. That's what we can expect to hear from the president momentarily.
Mike, is Keith still within range? I want to know what the farmers are saying in his rural area about the tariffs. Is he still in range or not? Is he gone?
He's about 100 yards away, Greta. He's driving back to northeast Iowa.
All right, then tell me, what's that parking lot you're in? Because I'll tell you, one of the things I look for when I go through states is I look at the shopping centers and see whether there are a lot of cars in the shopping center or a lot of parking spaces. I mean, I look for sort of indicators to see whether there's a robust, economic engine in the community.
Yeah, we are at an event center, Greta. If we do pan the camera across, there is a shopping center. Now, you're going to see several hundred people in the distance. Those are actual ICE protesters, anti-ICE protesters. They're milling about. Look, we haven't had a good read on the ground as of yet because of the winter weather. stalling flights coming out of Washington. We haven't been in Iowa very long, but look, you definitely will hear from the president talking about the economic engine here in Iowa and whether that is running as well as he hopes it is running here just outside of Des Moines moments from now.
You talk about the ICE protesters. Any handle on how many are there? Does it? Can you get any sense of it? It's sort of hard with the camera.
Yeah, as we drove in, Greta, there was several hundred protesters there with a few flagrant remarks for the president, for ICE in general. People are upset here. Of course, Des Moines, a much more liberal part of the state than others. We're about maybe 10 miles outside of Des Moines. But people are upset here. They're upset with the handling of, or at least some people are, with the handling of everything that's going on in Minnesota right now. But again, yesterday we heard from Caroline Leavitt. She says the president still has total and complete confidence in Secretary Noem. We'll see if that holds through the remaining days of this week.
Mike Carter in Clive, Iowa. Thank you, sir. And a 39-year-old West Virginia librarian, Morgan Morrow, is under arrest. Why? Well, for allegedly, you decide whether allegedly is the right word, trying to recruit people on social media to assassinate President Trump. According to a criminal complaint obtained by WOWK, in one of Morrow's TikTok videos, she advocates for Trump's assassination. Here's a screenshot of the video. And on the screen, you can see a caption of what Morrow says. The caption reads, quote, "Surely a sniper with a terminal illness can't be a big ask out of 343 million, end quote. According to Jackson County authorities, Morrow admitted the TikTok video was intended as a threat directed towards President Trump, but she claims she had no intentions of personally carrying out the threat. Morrow has been charged with one count of threats of terrorist acts. Coming up, this video slipped through Iran's blockade on the internet. It is horrifying, showing the lengths Iran is going to silence protesters. That video and the record.
Everybody's reporting the same stories, the same spin. You turn the channel, it's always the same. But not us. We're different. We report the real news. No spin, just the facts. Turn to us, and you won't turn back.
Tune in to Rob Schmidt tonight on Newsmax.
All exposure to products that contain asbestos can be harmful. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma, please call. Our firm has been exclusively dedicated to mesothelioma victims for decades. Let us meet you in your home, office, anywhere, and offer you our MesoCare promise. Our dedication to you is unmatched. Call now for our free book.
Call 800-801-8000 or go to mesobook.com.
David trusts Prevagen for his brain, and this is his story.
Nice to meet you. My name is David. I've been a pharmacist for 44 years. When I have customers come in, I recommend Prevagen. Number one, because it's safe and effective, does not require a prescription. And I've been taking it quite a while myself, and I love it when the customers come back in and tell me, David, that really works so good for me. Makes my day.
Prevagen has been the #1 selling brain supplement nationwide for over 10 years.
I'm putting with Abe Lincoln's cane right now.
These are 40-something years old.
Yeah. There we go. Oh, come on!
I really believe that God put us on a course to take care of all these catastrophic needs of service members, Gold Star widows.
It's because of all of them that we get to do what we do.
Let's do good together.
Let's do it.
People got to give every time I miss.
You got to give $11.
There we go. You're the man. Donate $11 a month at T2T.org.
These days, supporting the right causes matters more than ever. That's why I chose Patriot Mobile. They're not just a great mobile service provider, they're all about giving back. Every bill helps support causes we believe in: family, faith, and freedom. You get great nationwide coverage on all 3 main networks. Even better, you're doing it with an American company that stands up for us. It's time to make the switch, y'all. Let's support a wireless company that's got our back. Go to patriotmobile.com and make the switch today.
Immuno 150 may be the best food supplement in the world because it contains 70 plant minerals and 80 other nutrients. The 3 videos on our website tell you how this product and 7 times more minerals can improve your health.
The darkness of bipolar depression made me feel like I was losing interest in the things I love. Then I found a chance to let in the light.
Discover Capilita,
Unlike some medicines that only treat bipolar 1, Caplyta is proven to deliver significant symptom relief from both bipolar 1 and 2 depression. And in clinical trials, movement disorders and weight gain were not common.
Elderly dementia patients have increased risk of death or stroke. Caplyta is not approved for dementia-related psychosis. Call your doctor about new or sudden mood changes, behaviors, or suicidal thoughts right away. Antidepressants may increase these risks. Report fever, confusion, stiff muscles, which may be life-threatening, or uncontrolled muscle movements, which may be permanent. High cholesterol and weight gain may occur, as can high blood sugar, which may be fatal. Common side effects are sleepiness, dizziness, nausea, and dry mouth. These aren't all the side effects.
Ask your doctor how Caplyta can help you let in the light. Find savings at Caplyta.com.
Any minute, President Trump will begin speaking in Iowa. The speech is his first of the 2026 midterm election season. It's expected to focus on affordability and energy policy. We, of course, will bring you the speech when President Trump comes out. We're watching this very closely. While the president focuses on domestic issues, though, he's also facing international pressure by Iran. United States Armada is now in the Middle East. President Trump says it is to keep all options open. This after the Iranian regime brutally killed thousands of protesters. Middle East correspondent Zach Andrews joins me from Erbil, Iraq. That's within 60 miles of the Iranian border. Zach?
Well, Greta, new video evidence is escaping the regime's digital blockade, and this is now a month to the date since this unrest began. Some of the video that we're getting today, exclusive footage that has not aired to the world yet, it's only affirming some of the worst fears of casualty figures across the country. And one of the videos that was verified by the BBC yesterday, it's too graphic to show. It's bodies piled up on top of each other inside the Tehran Pars hospital in East Tehran. And this while, according to a U.S.-based human rights activist agency, they claim they've now confirmed through different methods 5,633 protester deaths and the deaths of more than 300 regime security forces as well. Our team has now independently verified footage from one of the massacres that was on the night of Thursday, January 8th. And through our sources in Tehran, we were able to corroborate the footage and the timing, the place, everything there. It's 2 weeks old now, this video, but the moments that it captured, disturbing. Gunfire heard ripping through the crowd. We do warn that while you don't see anything graphic in the video, the audio here is what is really chilling. Some viewer discretion advised. Here's that clip. Our sources there telling us that they were firing from the tops of buildings down into the unarmed crowd below that was demonstrating that night. Now, the U.S. Central Command here, CENTCOM, has announced that it has begun a multi-day readiness exercise to demonstrate the ability to deploy, disperse, and sustain combat air power across the Middle East, CENTCOM says, as the USS Abraham Lincoln, like you mentioned, Greta, the Carrier Strike Group, has now entered CENTCOM's AO. And we've also got an interesting update here from the president. Before he's taking the stage, he just about an hour ago posted on Truth Social about where we are currently in Iraq. He said, quote, "I'm hearing that the great country of Iraq might make a very bad choice by reinstalling Nouri al-Maliki as prime minister. Last time Maliki was in power, the country descended into poverty and total chaos. That should not be allowed to happen again because of his insane policies and ideologies. If elected, the United States of America will no longer help Iraq. And if not there to help, Iraq has zero chance of success, prosperity, or freedom. Make Iraq great again." So that post about an hour ago from the president, a lot going on here, Greta. At the same time, we're watching intently what is taking place with the movement and the military hardware for potential options on the table for Iran. The president now posting about the new leadership or potential new leadership in Iraq. And we're also following headlines of ISIS escapes at ISIS detainment facilities in northeast Syria. A lot of headlines, a lot to cover. But the big thing to watch for here in the next 24, 48 hours is this military movement. Now that everything seems to be in place, what could become of an operation with Iran? Greta?
Zach, it's amazing how social media has made the world so small. I mean, just think about it, is that President Trump is in Iowa posting that. You are all across the world in Erbil, Iraq, reporting on it. It's amazing how quick we get information out. Zach Anders, thank you.
Thanks, Greta.
And today is a somber reminder of a time when a group of people driven by hate, anti-Semitism, and cruelty carried out the deadliest, largest, and most targeted genocide in history. 81 years ago today, the Soviet army liberated the Nazi death camp called Auschwitz. There they found 7,000 prisoners, including hundreds of children. The soldiers who had already been fighting a deadly war were not prepared for what they saw next. Upon marching through the gates of Auschwitz, a Soviet officer said, quote, "Wherever one looked, he saw piles of human bodies. In some places, the former prisoners, looking like living skeletons, sat or lay around. Many of them could not be helped. A few who could still walk took us around the camp and told us what happened there. It's impossible to describe everything we saw there," end quote. 2 years ago, I went to Auschwitz. It's located in southern Poland, about 40 miles west of Krakow. If you are driving around that area, oblivious to what happened in Auschwitz, it looks like ordinary farmland. But then you see the train tracks, and it hits you. That is where millions of Jews entered Auschwitz only to be murdered because they were Jews. The ways they were killed is unforgettable and certainly unforgivable. This is where 700 Jews would be brought in. They'd be lodged in here, about 700. They would then, the SS would drop cyanide down in holes like this in the ceiling. There are a bunch of them littered throughout this space. And then after they were all killed, other prisoners would have to go in and collect their bodies and bring their bodies into this second area. And this second area that's adjacent has the ovens, has the crematorium, and they would burn them. The women would have their heads shaved after they were killed because the Germans used their hair for such things as insulation on airplanes. But there are a couple of crematoriums, a couple of ovens in this area. The Nazis murdered 6 million Jews. They also killed gays, people with disabilities, and gypsies. Today, the few remaining Auschwitz survivors visited the site to commemorate 81 years since liberation. They laid flowers and wreaths at the execution wall, also known as the Wall of Death. That is where Nazis shot and killed thousands. Today, the world remembers those atrocities and with the hope of never again. But of course, we had October 7th, another cruel slaughter of Jews. Coming up, some of America's waterways are frozen. Guess who's answering the call to help? Start guessing that when the record continues.
You know Rob Finnerty. He's smart, bold, and stands strong for your values. Rob is fighting for you. Watch Finnerty weeknights only on Newsmax.
What's gold is new again. Pardon the pun. But considering gold has been used as currency since around 550 BC, it has been on fire the past year. I'm here with Daniel Boston, the founder of Preserve Gold. Why is gold so stable and such a good investment for many people?
Take the central bank, for example, the Federal Reserve. They print money out of thin air, and then they take that printed money to go buy hard assets like gold to protect themselves against the very risks that they're creating. So I always tell people, don't do what the big players are telling you to do. Do what they're doing themselves.
Yeah, watch what they're doing.
That's correct.
Okay. If people are interested in investing with Preserve Gold, how do they get started?
Text Newsmax to 50505 to get your free information and up to $15,000 in free gold and silver with a qualified purchase. That's right. Text Newsmax to 50505.
All right. No way you can miss it.
Don't kibble your dog.
Oh, hey, Dr. Marty.
Hey, Babb.
But what's wrong with this? It's premium stuff.
Let's check it out. It's still kibble, which means it's ultra-processed at extremely high temperatures that destroy the nutrients in the food. But at Dr. Marty, we gently freeze-dried premium meats, fruit, and vegetables, locking in their nutrients.
Never kibbled.
You got it, kid, and they're gonna love it.
Are you ready to make your dream kitchen a reality? With high-quality cabinets, accents, and accessories designed for all styles and all budgets, Cabinets to Go is the place to go. Get the craftsmanship, styles, and features you want at a price you can't find anywhere else. And right now, you can get it all at 0% for 48 months. We'll even help you imagine it before installation with a free 3D design. Visit us at any one of our beautiful showrooms nationwide to get started today. Cabinets to go, designed to wow.
Joining us is Dr. Drew from the Wellness Company with advice for dealing with seasonal colds and flu. Doctor?
Cold and flu season is here, and every year you or a loved one gets sick. Your doctor can't see you. Waiting in a crowded urgent care is brutal. This is a particularly bad cold and flu season, and it's why doctors suggest every family needs an emergency medical kit. Your medical emergency kit is filled with essential prescriptions. It includes antibiotics like generic Z-Pak to get well faster, amoxicillin for pneumonia, strep throat, ear infections, plus prescriptions for nausea and UTIs, and even ivermectin. It's easy. Just match your symptoms to the prescription in your guidebook or call the telemedicine doctor standing by. Take your medication early and feel better faster. Having a medical emergency kit is like having an urgent care in your home. No waiting to see a doctor, no lines at the pharmacy.
Smart advice. We've shared the website and discount code below to save viewers $45. Order now and your kit will be rushed to your door. Thank you, doctor.
Set sail toward fast asthma relief with Brethora.
$300 for a refill?
Don't pay that. Use Single Care. Look up your prescription, show the coupon to the pharmacist, and save.
See why more people are saving with Single Care.
And any minute, President Trump will be speaking in Iowa. The speech is first of the midterm election season. And now that the big winter storm has passed, the threat, not over. Now we have to deal with the extreme cold that's setting in. This means some of America's ports and waterways have been frozen over, so the Coast Guard has now been called in. National Security Correspondent Carla Babb joins me with the latest. Carla.
Hey, Greta. The Coast Guard received a call for help yesterday as crews were already out clearing ice from shipping lanes. Take a look at this video. That is the Coast Guard cutter Penobscot Bay rescuing a tugboat and barge trapped in icy waters near Barrytown, New York on Monday. The tug Erin Elizabeth had 5 people aboard and 4 barges in tow carrying stone and scrap metal. Now, if you could see there, the Coast Guard cutter broke the tug and barge free from the ice and confirmed there was no damage to the tug before resuming operations. The 140-foot Coast Guard cutter is built to slice through the ice, you can see there, by essentially climbing over the ice and crushing it down. Penobscot Bay provided search and rescue capabilities to the ice-covered areas in New York City and the Hudson Valley, and it helps ensure safe navigation for winter essentials like gasoline, heating oil, food, and medical supplies. Now, those shipping lanes are critical for millions of Americans living in coastal areas across the Northeast, Greta, especially when a major storm hits. This was just another example of the Coast Guard saving lives and helping people get the essentials they need.
Carla, the Coast Guard, I mean, this is an emergency, right? I mean, it's a definitely emergency. And, you know, one of the things, you know, this whole discussion about DHS, Kristi Noem, is that Coast Guard comes under her, FEMA comes under her, ICE comes under her. I mean, she's got 240,000 employees, and she's got all these different crises around the world all sort of happening at once. I mean, it's an incredible deal. But having said that, where's Penobscot Bay?
So that's on the Hudson River. Well, actually, no, Penobscot Bay is actually somewhere in Maine. That's what the cutter is named, and it's named after this place in Maine. And they were on the Hudson River when they were saving this tug and barge. And they were also operating over the snow. They're in the Great Lakes right now, trying to keep those shipping lanes free. You know, a lot going on. And like you said, with it under DHS, there are people, just today I was talking with some people that were saying maybe it should go back under the Pentagon where the Coast Guard was initially. So there's with everything going on with DHS and the Pentagon. So
you know what the other interesting thing is that these ice cutters aren't cheap. And the problem is that, you know, there's a decision that has to be made, is that it doesn't happen often that we need them. When we need them, we really need them. But how much money do you want to spend them? It's sort of like snow removal equipment in D.C. We don't have much of it because we don't get snow often. So when we get snow, we're in deep trouble here, like we did the other day. But these ice cutters, we don't have a lot of them.
We don't have a lot, but I will say good news on the horizon. There was just 2 contracts awarded, one to a Finnish company and one to a U.S. company, to build up to 6 more of these ice-breaking cutters. Arctic defense, as we've been talking about over and over with Greenland, very important, and so hopefully more help is on the way.
What about like China? I mean, when we do shipping, we do it internationally. We're dealing with everybody. You know, they're trying to get ships in and out. Are these other countries, I mean, do they have ice-breaking boats like what you do, or that maybe they don't have the problems that we do?
They do have icebreakers, and that has been, in terms of Greenland, that has been the fears. The Chinese have been collaborating a lot more with the Russians, who also have these capabilities, and so people have been looking at the Arctic, and when the frigid weather hits, and they go, we need more of these. At one point, we didn't even have enough to keep what we have going on in continental United States covered, and they say with the shipping lanes expanding, we just need more.
The other thing that's interesting about this is that there's so much, it affects even commerce in the interior of the country, because whatever's coming into the country may be headed to the interior of the country. But we've got, with the air industry, when it has problems, we got terrible storms, all the stuff that's carried in by airplane, all of a sudden, that can't get into the right place. Then we've got the coastal things, the shipping, that's a problem. And then I remember, when we have longshoremen strike, and we've got shipping boats, stacked up 30, 40 out at sea, who can't come into shore to offload. The fact that all this transportation that comes into this country doesn't just affect these coastal regions.
Yeah, this right here that happened, this rescue was on the Hudson River, and that's a great point, because we always talk about the flight cancellations, because that affects so many people, immediately. But there are also all of these shipping lanes that are critical to getting these essential goods. That's what the Coast Guard is here to protect.
Yeah, indeed. It's actually fascinating. Anyway, Carla Babb, thank you. Now to Russia, where the Kremlin is offering some big incentives to people who join their army and fight against Ukraine. The incentives for new soldiers include tens of thousands of dollars in bonuses and debt relief. Russia is also offering freedom to those held in its prisons, and Russia is not just appealing to its own citizens to fight. Russia recently passed laws granting foreigners who enlist a faster track to Russian citizenship. Russian President Vladimir Putin says 700,000 troops are already fighting in Ukraine. But a nationwide draft is unpopular in Russia. We're going to see whether the promise of cash, freedom, and citizenship works for Vladimir Putin. Coming up, at any moment, President Donald Trump is expected to take the stage in Clive, Iowa. That when the record continues.
Falls are the #1 cause of injury to senior citizens. Falling down stairs can be disastrous. Acorn Stair Lifts has the solution. Just don't fall. Sit, relax, ride with an Acorn Stair Lift, the world's leader in stair lifts. That's right, don't let limited mobility keep you from going up and down your stairs, even outside. Call Acorn Stair Lifts now for a free information kit and no obligation quote. Now you can safely ride with your Acorn Stair Lift.
Now I don't have to worry about him climbing those stairs anymore.
And our Acorn Stair Lift was very affordable.
Our Acorn Stair Lift is definitely more affordable than moving.
The Acorn Stair Lift has a padded seat and backrest for maximum comfort. It easily folds up for access to the stairway. 5 safety sensors stop your Acorn Stair Lift if there is something in the way. And it even runs during power outages.
I am king of my castle again.
You'll be working directly with the world's leader in stair lifts. That's right, there's no middleman. Acorn's trained technicians professionally install your stair lift directly to the staircase. In most cases, in 2 hours or less. There's no need for special construction. We don't leave until you're completely comfortable using your Acorn Stair Lift.
Don't risk a serious fall going down the stairs.
I was really surprised at how little it cost.
Call for your free no-obligation information kit and quote from Acorn Stair Lifts. Just don't fall. Safely ride up and down your steps.
Give your life a lift with Acorn Stair Lifts.
Call 1-800-908-4077 right now for your free information kit or visit our website today. That number again is 1-800-908-4077. Call now.
Oh, it's cold outside. Time to protect your vehicle from winter's wrath. Of course, the hot sun can be tough on vehicles too. You need WeatherTech. Laser measured floor liners and cargo liner will shield the carpeting from sand and snow. For your interior, there's seat protector and sunshade, plus mud flaps and bump step for the exterior. Impact liner with shock absorbing rings safeguards your truck bed from costly damage. Order American-made products at WT.com. Surf's up.
At Ancestry, we believe every question about the past is a spark. again when curiosity strikes. About the everyday lives of your family, we're here with answers only your ancestors can provide. How is your family woven into 250 years of U.S. history? Find out now at Ancestry.
At any moment, President Donald Trump is expected to deliver remarks on the economy and energy in Clive, Iowa. We're going to take you live to that event as soon as the president takes the stage. We're watching it very closely. White House and Washington reporter for Politico, Daniel Lippman, joins me. Nice to see you, Daniel.
Good to see you, too.
Okay, there's so many interesting races out there, but the one that I have my eye on, and maybe explain to me, is Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. He's got a Republican, he's got a primary. He's a Republican, he's got a primary against Congresswoman Julia Letlow. And President Trump has endorsed her over Cassidy, both Republicans. Why?
Yeah, you don't see this very often when he's an incumbent. He's been a loyal Republican for his entire career, but he is the chairman of the Senate Health Committee. And so he was in charge of, confirming RFK Jr. for that job for HHS, and he has been pretty disappointed. And they've had a bunch of run-ins where RFK gave promises about, we're not going to change anything with the vaccines, and then to Cassidy, who's a doctor, and then RFK has been, doing a lot on vaccines, and so there's been some criticism from Cassidy on that.
All right, any idea who's got the upper hand in that primary?
So Cassidy, as the incumbent, he has the incumbent advantage, but the Trump factor is still huge. And so even when Trump is not in office, he's going to be making and breaking these candidates. And so it's still too early to tell, but it's going to be an uphill battle. And so that's why we've seen other candidates, people like Tom Tillis, say, hey, I want to just retire. I don't want to have to lose.
He doesn't want to lose, right? What about Joni Ernst, who said she's not going to run in Iowa? Is she leaving because she couldn't win, or is she leaving because she's sick of it and ready to move on or do something else?
I think she's pretty, ready to move on. I don't think, she was pretty close to Trump as well. And she was that critical vote to confirm Pete Hegseth. And remember, Ernst is a sexual assault survivor from the military. She served,
and he got accused of.
And he was
stuff.
accused. He denied it, but he's had a lot of controversies since. And I think it's when you're in the military and everything is on merit. You come to Washington and you're thinking, oh, everyone is just focused on social media. What am I doing here? And so that for people who are serious politicians on both sides of the aisle, that's dispiriting to people like Ernst.
Well, every 4 years, certainly. But people say this is the most important election in my lifetime, presidential. This election, though, this midterm, is profoundly important. Maybe not the most important in my lifetime, because if the Republicans lose the House, it's going to completely lock up the legislative process, and there are going to be impeachments. There's going to be investigations, House oversight, there's going to be everything. So this is profoundly important to the Republican Party.
Yeah, and it increases the chances that J.D. Vance is not going to walk away with it for 2028, because Marco Rubio has said, I'm not going to run in 2028. J.D. Vance, I want to help my friend out. But if Republicans emerge bloodied in November after the midterms, then it's going to be a competitive primary, and people like Vance will have a more uphill battle. But it's going to be very busy next year because of all those investigations, and Congress does seem to be doing a little bit more oversight. In the last few days, they're calling Kristi Noem to testify in March, and especially with the Minneapolis shooting, Republicans have said, hey, they've rediscovered their spines and said, hey, we're not just Trump's toadies. We got to stand up and we got to fight for Congress's interests because it's, for the first year, it's really been, let's just do whatever Trump wants.
Well, investigations are important. I spent a lot of time on Epstein, a little bit more than I think is necessary, because I don't know what will come out of it ultimately. So I don't know what the country gains from it.
And a lot of those Republicans who voted for the Epstein files, they've kind of moved on and they're not interested anymore.
Right, but the thing is that Congress is not busy legislating. And what still sticks in this country and has to be resolved is health care, because it's just not working for a big portion of the population. And and I don't hear I hear everybody criticizing it, But those who have the job to do something about it, the legislators, are not real busy coming up with innovative ideas.
Yeah, it's very disappointing. Even for people who have employer-provided health insurance, the premiums are really expensive as well. And so for people who have lost health care coverage or they're facing huge premium spikes because they're part of Obamacare and there's been no fix, even though Trump, Republicans, and Democrats, they want some type of fix. That has been very disappointing, and it's going to be tough for Republicans in the midterm elections. I think one other point about the lack of legislating is that when you create the one reconciliation bill a year or a congressional term, and that got passed in May or June of last year, I think it was right before the July 4th holiday, that was Trump's deadline, then you don't have every few weeks, oh, we're passing this bill on affordable energy. But also, we're having this on food prices. And so that creates a lot of missing media opportunities for Republicans
but not only
and
that,
Americans.
I mean, they do that to get around the filibuster rule in the Senate because they only need 51% in the Senate with the reconciliation. But the thing is that where we lose on that is that we don't have a full and robust debate because it's all rolled into one. It's like rolling over our heads so fast that our heads spin. Is that the American people don't really get to see a lot of there's not a lot of discussion about it.
And who's going to read? A lot of these members of Congress, the vast majority of them, are not reading the thousands of pages.
It's impossible.
So,
it's impossible.
And so I think that it reduces the ability of Congress to actually do their job. And I think that you would hope that they would just have more bipartisanship, where they could work together on individual bills, not just have a Christmas tree every 2 years.
It was a big lie that anyone read Obamacare because I tried to read it and it was so incoherent. And I've been reading statutes my whole life, and
But then they also didn't. Trump hasn't sold the bill as much as he should have.
Anyway, Daniel Lippman, Politico. Thank you.
Thanks, Greta.
Today, the National Transportation Safety Board presented its findings in the investigation of the tragic January 29, 2025 mid-air collision in Washington, D.C. The deadly collision was between an Army Black Hawk helicopter and an American Airlines regional jet. 67 people died. And today, new visual simulations of the view of the pilots in each aircraft were shown to help determine the probable cause of the deadly mid-air collision. Here are the NTSB's findings in part.
Deep underlying systemic failures, system flaws aligned to create the conditions that led to this devastating tragedy. 20 minutes before the accident, the total number of aircraft the local controller was handling fluctuated between 7 and 12. At about 10 to 15 minutes beforehand, he said he was feeling a little overwhelmed. The operations supervisor said it was totally fine, no problem. How do you even capture to one person, he's fine, to that local controller who's busy, 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 and maybe doesn't have 2 seconds to say, hey, let's deconflict, while the operations supervisor is listening to all of this. Everybody in the tower is hearing it. I mean, how is that not complacency?
Should the local and helicopter control positions had been decombined at the time of the accident?
We believe they should have been decombined in accordance with their manual, however softly it may have been written, and that we focused some recommendations actually in this area because we're concerned about that combining of positions.
Okay, it's absurd that those helicopters running up and down the river next to the airport between the Pentagon and Andrews. A lot of people can just drive. Those helicopters are a big problem with the congestion, but that's my opinion. Coming up, TSA has found some strange things. That when the record continues.
Balance of Nature is a wonderful product. Whether you're a teenager or whether you're older, you don't have to be in your 70s to take the product. I recommend it to all of my friends. I'm very grateful that I started on Balance of Nature.
This new year only, get 50% off for 1 year when you subscribe to the Whole Health System as a preferred customer. Because the best New Year's resolutions are the easiest ones. Go to balanceofnature.com today.
If you're over 40 and taking probiotics, stop. Americans are choking down fistfuls of probiotics, yet they're still feeling sicker and sicker and fatter and fatter. I'm Dr. Stephen Gundry, And that's why I created BioComplete 3. Thousands have used it. It's a major part of how I lost 70 pounds and feel 20 years younger. For a limited time, you can try BioComplete 3 risk-free for 90 days. Go to gundrymd.com/TV.
Joining us is Dr. Drew from the Wellness Company with advice for dealing with seasonal colds and flu. Doctor?
Cold and flu season is here, and every year you or a loved one gets sick. Your doctor can't see you. Waiting in a crowded urgent care is brutal. This is a particularly bad cold and flu season, and it's why doctors suggest every family needs an emergency medical kit. Your medical emergency kit is filled with essential prescriptions. It includes antibiotics like generic Z-Pak to get well faster, amoxicillin for pneumonia, strep throat, ear infections, plus prescriptions for nausea and UTIs, and even ivermectin. It's easy. Just match your symptoms to the prescription in your guidebook or call the telemedicine doctor standing by. Take your medication early and feel better faster. Having a medical emergency kit is like having an urgent care in your home. No waiting to see a doctor, no lines at the pharmacy.
Smart advice. We've shared the website and discount code below to save viewers $45. Order now and your kit will be rushed to your door. Thank you, doctor.
I'm a martial artist, a skydiver, a pilot, and all of them require your feet to work. Get up in the morning and it felt like I was standing on marbles on my heel. When I went into the Good Feet store, the fitting was personalized. It was all about me. You put in the arch supports and your day becomes better and the sun shines, the unicorns run by, and it's a good life. I'm Randy and that's my Good Feet story.
See for yourself with the free personalized arch support fitting at the Good Feet store.
So, here is a before of my stomach before Sono Bello, and this is after.
This year, don't just lose weight, lose stubborn fat and sagging extra skin permanently at Sono Bello.
I wanted the results of a tummy tuck, but not the downtime.
We've helped over 300,000 people transform.
Do you want that flat stomach? You go get that flat stomach.
Schedule your free, no-obligation consultation. Our flexible payment options make it easy to get started today. Call or go to sonobello.com right now.
Sponsored by Dr. Marty Nature's Blend, the health of fresh food with the convenience of kibble. Visit drmartypets.com/TV.
Don't kibble your dog.
Oh, hey, Dr. Marty.
Hey, Babb.
But what's wrong with this? It's premium stuff.
Let's check it out. It's still kibble, which means it's ultra-processed at extremely high temperatures that destroy the nutrients in the food. But at Dr. Marty, we gently freeze-dried premium meats, fruit, and vegetables, locking in their nutrients.
Never kibbled.
You got it, kid, and they're gonna love it.
People have tried to smuggle some very strange things through America's airports. TSA has compiled its list of some of the most unusual it saw in 2025. In second place, turtles. But it is where they were found. TSA officers at Miami Airport discovered turtles hidden in a woman's bra. Not only that, in a separate incident, TSA at a Newark airport also found a turtle in a man's pants. Yes, I'm thinking it too. What is wrong with some people? A lot, right? So turtles took the second place for most unusual. So what took first place? TSA says the most unusual was a replica pipe bomb found at Boise, Idaho's airport. And we're still waiting remarks from President Trump in Iowa. Stay tuned. My colleague Ed Henry, day 2 of his new show at 5 p.m. will be following the latest from the president. So stay for Ed Henry, The Big Take. That's next. Thanks for watching Newsmax.